Let's hope that the recording, well, not the recording, let's hope that the sound quality is better today. $37, 40 people. $46. All right. I really wonder what happened to my 10 missing students. And if they do show up to other classes. So, dear students, today we are going to have, I think, a very interesting and important class. We're going to talk about a topic that's quite dear to me, being European. That is fascism, or as I like to call it, the ideology of bullies. Now, today's class will be quite special. I have, I think, very different angle of talking about this subject than you would find in any other course with the same title. So it'll be quite unique, my approach to explaining fascism to you. So please sit back for that. All right, so fascism, or the ideology of bullets, of course, in black, the color of fascism. Rather said dark gray. So what will my lecture be like? First, I'm going to give the classic lecture where I'm going to introduce the concept and I'll talk a bit about historical background. However, my lecture is not about history, at least not the bulk of it. In most part, I'm going to be talking about, in part two, the fascist mentality. How do fascists think? And maybe you could figure out that you are a fascist. And I'm going to talk about how fascists act. I'm going to talk about fascist tactics and practice, right? So that's going to be my focus, not so much history. We'll start with history, but my focus is on helping you recognize what fascism is and also who is a fascist. You over there in the back, looking at you, and exposing maybe each other as being secret fascists. Now, that's today. Next time we're going to talk about World War II and the Nazis, and also will critique fascism, but that's not for today. Today I will just explain it to you. That's my only goal. Now let's start with the basics, right? What's fascism? Fascism is a type of nationalism. That's where you should orient it in the political spectrum. Nationalism is the idea that each people should have their own country, or the other way around, that each country should have one type of people living in it. Mexico for the Mexicans, right? That is nationalism. And you should care first about your own people. Now, fascism is a radical variant of this. Fascism, in very simple terms, and I'm going to explain in complex terms, but in very simple terms, it is an authoritarian ultranationalism that serves some kind of ruling elite or has a strong leader, right? It's authoritarian, it's ultranationalist, and it's about this strong ruling class, which either can be one person or a group of persons that is there. Leader, authoritarian, ultranationalist. That's fascism. Now, within fascism, you have variants, and one of the most famous variants of fascism is called Nazism, or the Nazis. I think you've all at least once heard of Nazis, or the word Nazi, right? Now, Nazis are fascists, but they're fascists who root their beliefs in racial superiority. In other words, Nazis are racist fascists. Not all fascists are racist. All Nazis are fascist, though, right? So Nazism is a particular flavor of fascism that we are going to discuss in more detail next time, because it is, although it is fascist in every way, it adds a lot to the theory. It comes with a lot of philosophical baggage, actually, Nazism. Now, Nazism is a bit confusing if you would look it up in a dictionary that you're going to read. The word Nazi actually comes from Nationalsozialismus in German, or National Socialism. They might say, well, so is it socialism? No, it's not related to socialism. Very little of what the Nazis did has anything to do with the socialist way of thinking, has anything to do with Rousseau, has anything to do with any Marx, any of these things. It is quite simply a trick. It is a name that Hitler chose to win elections. He chose it to appeal to workers who he afterwards backstabbed. Now you would say, no, my teacher, you're just making that up to make excuse for socialism. No, I'm not. You will see that this makes a lot of sense. Once you understand how fascism actually works, this very basic historical trick will make a lot of sense, because no historian will qualify Nazis as left-wing, as socialists, right? They are a variant of fascists. They just have socialism in their name, as I will explain you why later. Just know that it's a giant trick, but everything in fascism is a giant trick. That's the first thing you will learn about it. All right. So where does fascism come from, right? Where is it historically located? The first person or the first person with power to use fascism as an ideology was Benito Mussolini, the dictator of Italy. So fascism is an Italian philosophy, right? Going back to the earliest fascists we saw in this course were also Italian, Machiavelli, right, and Dante. They're like the grandfathers of this. So it was true an Italian idea, and the word fascism, right, comes from the symbol you see in the middle. This axe, this like fat axe, because this is both an agricultural tool to harvest wheat, to harvest grain, and you can hit a person with it, right? So it has both the symbolism of strength, of lethal strength, and of fertility of the land, right? So that's a fascist, and fascism, that the axe is called a fascist, and fascism is the ideology of strength and virility, let's say. So that comes from Benito Mussolini, the man who you can see on the left looking upwards, right? So he's not the only fascist, he's just the one that started it. Other famous fascists are Francisco Franco from Spain. Spain was fascist. It was like the longest running fascist country. And also Japan, for example. Japan during and before World War II was on the fascist side of things, right? But these were the original G's of fascism, right? Then it spread to other countries. For example, Finland was fascist at some point. Romania turned fascist at some point. And Latin America, a lot of people had sympathy for fascism. For example, Vasconcelos, Minister of Education. But not everybody was a fascist, of course. So that's where it came from. Now, in its German variant, right, of Nazism, this obviously comes from Adolf Hitler. I think all of you have heard of who Hitler is. If not, I'm going to explain you next time, right? But what you should know for now is that Hitler was the fascist dictator of Nazi Germany, because Germany was fascist too, just in their own racist variant. So today I will use Germany as an example of fascism. Next time I'm going to talk about the more specific Nazi elements of it. But for today we'll just consider them fascist, because they are. So that's the people where it comes from. But why did it happen, right? What's the historical context? Well, in short, the historical context is the failure of liberalism. There's four factors that contribute to this. The first one is the aftermath of World War I. So fascism happened between both world wars. The philosophy is older, but the political practice I'm talking about now, right? So what happened in World War I? Germany lost. Good thing. And they had to sign a treaty called the Versailles Treaty, which forced them, among other things, to pay back the destruction they caused. For example, they destroyed more or less the whole of Belgium, and there's whole cities that were just like nothing was left standing, like one door, but without a house around the door. That's literally in one city what was left standing. And they had to pay all that back, and didn't like that because that costed their economy, right? So they were a bit annoyed about this peace treaty, and so was Italy. Now, Italy was not on German side in World War I. They originally were neutral or sympathetic towards Germany, and then they flipped sides and joined the fight, and they didn't get anything from this because they were not originally attacked. They didn't get any compensation, and they also felt a bit victimized. Why? Because they're bitches. But that's how they felt about it, and this bolstered nationalist feelings in these countries, feelings that, you know, the rest are mean to us and we should be stronger because we're going to show them that us Italians are really the alpha males of Europe, etc., etc., etc. You can already feel this 500 years before with Machiavelli, this kind of jealousy of France and all these other countries, right? Now this came together with an economic crisis. Turns out Marx was right again, and capitalism does go into crises every so many years. And that's exactly what happened in the 1930s. 1930s crisis was actually one of the biggest ones. A lot of people thought it was about to happen, and it really was. Germany was about to turn communist. Well, the communists were about to win the elections when Hitler killed them. That's how we got to power. He did some terrorist attack, or anarchists did it. Yeah, anarchists did it. Anyway, he blamed the communists for it, who didn't do it, and then they had them all arrested. But Germany and the rest of the world went to this deep economic crisis in the 1930s. So a lot of people got desperate. A lot of people got fed up with the system. To make things worse, the governments were very impotent. Most European countries at this point were governed by liberal parties. We talked about liberalism last week, right? And I told you one of the weak points of liberalism is that they're very bad at solving problems, because they have a tendency towards doing nothing, right? To just seeing if it doesn't figure itself out. That didn't work in a global crisis. So they were doing very poorly. Switching government was hard because you had a lot of different parties, and then I had to find some kind of agreement, and that would take a long time, and it just was not advancing. And for a lot of people, especially in Italy, this all was a theater because they couldn't vote anyway. You had democracy, but you had to pay to vote. So for poor people, you know, it was just waiting and seeing which rich asshole would become your president next and then fail again at solving these problems. So people were not happy with liberalism, right? So now you have all elements of a communist revolution, but it is not what happened because the elite, they saw this coming. They thought, okay, our guys, the liberals, they're losing. We are soon going to lose to the communists. We don't want that. So we will just jump on any alternative ship, right? Oh, we have these fascists here. They look quite mean, but hey, it's better than communism because I don't want to lose my money. So at the end, you always see this, that elites will back the fascists in the end. They might not be fascists, but when push comes to shove, they will always prefer the center right will side with the fascists against the left. And thus they kind of stopped a revolution from happening. They stopped communism by going with fascism. The lesson here is that fascism always comes out of the failures of liberalism. That is true in Germany, that is true in Italy, that is true in the United States when Trump came to power, that is true in Brazil. You might say, no, teacher, weren't there socialists before Bolsonaro? Yes, but there were 2 years in between in which you had liberal government, which failed horribly. This is true in Russia. This is true in any country where you have fascism. It always comes on the grave of failing liberalist state. Now, moving on, right? Now you might think, yeah, but teacher, I mean, I'm confused. Like you talk about Italy and Mussolini, and I don't know these guys. I thought Mussolini was some type of pizza, right? Don't worry, I got you, right? I will soon show you some cultural reference to this. But first, I want to drive home the point of fascism as a reaction against the failure of liberalism. Now, you don't need to believe me. We can read from the man himself, Benito Mussolini. This is a quote from him. You can see he has a very good sense of how to speak. He says, fascism rejects in democracy the conventional lie of political equality, the spirit of collective irresponsibility, and the myth of happiness and indefinite progress. One should not exaggerate the importance of liberalism in the past century, or make it a religion of humanity for all present and future times, when in reality it was only one of many doctrines of that century. Now liberalism is at the point of closing the doors of its deserted temple. That is why all political experiments of the contemporary world are anti-liberal, and the desire to exile them from history is supremely ridiculous, as if history was a hunting preserve for liberalism and professors, as if liberalism was the last and incomparable word of civilization. The present century is a century of authority, a century of the right, a fascist century. If you have appreciation for text, you can see that this man was very skilled at writing. Right? Now liberalism is on the point of closing the doors of its deserted temple. If you can just visually imagine the liberals closing their doors, it's a powerful image. So that's where it comes from. As I said, maybe you like with teacher, I never was there in 1930. Like I don't know. Okay, can't you give me some other example that I do recognize? Yes, I can. Here are 3 fictional examples of liberalism, of fascism, that you might have an easier time understanding. One of them is the Empire from Star Wars. The Empire of Star Wars is fascist in every way, in the way they dress, in their ideology, obviously, in what they're trying to do. Although it's a bit confusing because it's so unhistorical, right, what they're doing. Maybe a bit more direct is the Fire Nation from The Last Airbender. I might be ruining your childhood now, but the countries in The Last Airbender are metaphors for real countries, right? The Earth Nation is China, and the Fire Nation is Japan, both in geography, culture, and how they politically act, because they're trying to conquer everyone. So your friend Zuko is a fascist. Now you know. And I don't know, you're probably too young to have ever watched Samurai X, but you also, the main antagonist there, she also embodies fascist. Again, Japan embodies the fascist ideology. Is your childhood ruined?
Not really, because I think knowing that was kind of part of the fun of watching those shows.
Okay. Good, I'm
Not
happy.
that fascism is fun, but like they were the villains, so it was interesting.
Okay, okay. Good that Francisco and were not ruined by this. So now, fascism is a hard thing to talk about. It's a very contested field. There are a lot of visions on it, and my vision is quite unique, I would say, on that. What I will try to tell you today, right, is that the core elements of fascism, or that 2 very important elements of fascism, are deception and inconsistency. Fascism is inherently about lying, and it is inherently inconsistent because it's going to promise opposite things to people, right? And only one of them can be true. And that makes fascism very hard to study, because it's hard to know when a fascist leader is telling you his actual political beliefs or when they're just lying about something. Right now, all leaders lie, but fascists do it's part of what the ideology is, to be manipulative. So that makes it a bit hard to grasp onto, right? I can't just tell you a theory, because part of that theory is inconsistent and is a lie. Because fascism isn't really a coherent political theory to start with. Nazism is. With the Nazis, I can tell there's an actual theory that the Nazis have. Fascism, not so much. Fascism is more of an ambition. It's more a drive. It's more it's easier to describe who a fascist is than to describe fascism itself, right? So that's what I'm going to do. In this lecture, I'll make a distinction between a fascist mentality, between how fascists think, and fascist practices, what fascists do. And if you understand both of them, you'll be able to recognize the fascist that is behind you, right? Because they are everywhere. We just don't talk about it, right? Because very few people talk about fascism these days. And you might wonder, but why should we talk about fascism? Why are you apparently so animated, teacher, to talk about this? Well, three reasons. One, I'm from Belgium and we got conquered by the fascists, so I never forgave them, getting back at them right now. Second, because and they captured my grandfather, motherfuckers. He survived. But it was very violent. Fascism is the most violent movement in history. Not because it killed most people. That, no doubt, goes to liberalism. Liberalism via hunger killed hundreds of millions. Second in place would be communism, um, with maybe 80 million people. And then you have fascism with about 70 million people that they killed. But the difference is the fascists did all of this in 10 years, right? Liberals had hundreds of years to get so many people killed. Fascism, in the time they had, they made a lot of use of that time to flow a lot of blood, right? So you might want to be interested in how does this very violent ideology actually works. Maybe you want to prevent massive violence. The other reason is that fascism is back. I will claim, and next lecture I'm going to elaborate on that, that the comeback of fascism is probably the most important political event in the last 10 years. Fascism made a very big comeback in the world. In Russia, Philippines, Brazil, Turkey, United States, we all, still have, Trump is still there, fascist presidents. Now you might say, but teacher, you think Trump is a fascist? Yes, I am. But you can't do it. He's not like Hitler. That's true. But we have to be adults about this. When I talk about fascism, right, I'm not talking about being like Hitler. You don't need to do what Hitler did to be a fascist. Yeah, you don't even need to kill one person to be a fascist. To be a fascist, you only need to do one thing. You need to think like a fascist, right? That's what it is. You need to agree with the ideology. You don't need to. It's like you would say somebody's not a communist because they haven't done what Stalin did. That's nonsense, right? You just need to agree with the theory. And a lot of people today are in the camp of fascism. They call themselves conservatives or some other things, but you will learn that they are a very specific breed of politician because they think like them. And that's what I'm going to talk about first, the fascist mentality. There is a way in which fascists think. And once you know that, you can recognize it, maybe, looking at you over there, in yourself. There's a picture of Mussolini thinking about Italy, right? You can see him all in love and deep thoughts about his country. So let's start with some philosophy, right? As we always should do. One concept that is very central to fascist thinking, and one of the only consistent things in fascism, is their admiration for the natural state of things. Not nature necessarily in terms of rivers and fish and stuff like that, but nature as in how the world was built, right? how things were intended. Nature as in our instincts, what we naturally want, our emotions, what comes natural, what was foreseen by evolution. They think this is very important, and they actually think it is more important than reason. It's very typical of fascists to go against science, because they say, I don't care what you think, right? I don't care about this climate change theory and models and all of that. I feel like it's getting colder, so it's not really happening, right? Um, they always will preserve that if something flows from your instinct, right, it must have been meant to be. It's natural, right? Um, and that places them on the right of the political spectrum, right? Rousseau also holds emotions against reason, but for very different reasons, as we saw in the past. And this idea that there's some kind of natural goodness to the world is common in the whole right of the political spectrum. Conservatives believe this, liberals believe this, fascists believe this, and Nazis believe this, that there's some kind of natural balance to the world, right? But fascism will take this idea the furthest. And they'll connect this idea of natural and things just being a certain way to morality. They start from a moral essentialism. What does that mean? Well, essentialism is the idea that things have an essence, right? That things are a certain way. And thus that people are a certain way. They are inherently good or bad, right? Miss Andrea is, in this case, good. Even she might not act like that all the time, but there's some kind of core to her, right? There's an essence to people. People are either bitch made or they're not. They're either weak or strong, right? Fascists believe that deep down you just are a certain way. And if that's true, then there's no point in changing that, right? People are either superior or they're not. Communists believe the exact opposite of this, as I'll soon explain you. And they say, well, one thing that's natural, right, is that we are different. They'd say, yeah, liberalism and socialism and communism, they can talk about equality, but that's not a fact. People are different. Some people are simply stronger than others. Some just man and woman, right? In all mammals, either man or the woman is going to be bigger and stronger than the other. In the case of humans, men are simply a bit bigger and a bit stronger than women are. And you would say, teacher, that's not true, but it is true. On average, it is true, right? Most of you girls would lose a fight against your father. Most of the guys here would probably not lose a fight against their mother, to give a silly example. Men are just a bit stronger than women, and that's apparently how it's naturally supposed to be like that. So why always complain about this? A fascist would say, not me. So people are different, right? Not just men and women, also men are different from each other. Some are simply smarter or more able or stronger than others, and others are inferior. Some groups are like that. People in Northern Africa are simply short. They're not particularly tall black people, right? So they must be inferior to the people in the center of Africa who are quite tall. So that's just how it is. God wanted it this way. And so you have natural inferiors and superiors. You have natural followers and natural leaders. And if this is how it's meant to be, why change that? Why not embrace inequality? Now that is with a very big if, right? Let's press the pause button here. If this is true. Communists would not believe this. Communists would say, you get strong by lifting weights, right? Forget about this naturally strong people. No, you get strong by going to the gym. If you want to be strong, go to the gym. Don't complain about, oh, I'm naturally like this or that. Same with intelligence. You become intelligent by studying, right? Not by being naturally that much smarter. Okay, yes, you have difference in IQ, but we, the communists, we can fix that, right? We have free education for everyone, and we don't believe in this premise that you have natural, inferior people. But then are communists. We're not talking about communists. We're talking about fascists today. So fascists believe in inequality. Matter of fact, they want to embrace inequality. Because one of the things that is natural, according to them, is the drive to power. Some of you sleeper fascists, a lot of you wrote this in your essays, right, on the Communist Manifesto, that what's really natural to man is that they're always trying to dominate, etc., etc. Well, fascists believe that too, and maybe they're correct in that. This is an idea they got from Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the more direct fathers of fascism. A lot of people don't want to say that, but I'll say it. Nietzsche is a fascist. And so he had this idea that man is always striving for power. Now, some other people also had that idea, for example, Machiavelli, but they were scared of it. This was still seen, Machiavelli, who was not the father, but the grandfather of fascism, he didn't think this was a good thing that people strove for power, right? It was a problem that needed to be dealt with. This new generation of fascists, they will embrace it. They'll say, no, this is great. We should celebrate this ambition. We should celebrate us trying to pull each other down and rise to the top. And that means that fascists are very opportunistic people. It's one of the first things you can recognize them by. Fascists are going to backstab whoever they need to backstab to get ahead in life. Preferably a weaker person than themselves, because they're also bitches deep down. So fascists are opportunistic. That means that fascism is a bit unstable politically, because they'll be fighting each other for power often. But they embrace this. They embrace this power struggle, because at least that will show us who's strong and who's weak. If we're going to fight each other, somebody's going to win, and we're going to know, right? We're going to know who was meant to be the leader in the first place. So fascists, they like competition in that sense. They celebrate it because it shows them strength and virility. They also like having a lot of children, but that's a different subject. I'll discuss it with the Nazis. Now, if I had to summarize it to one thing, right, that's at the very core of what fascism is. At the very core of fascism, you have the belief that the strong should rule the weak. The idea that might makes right. The idea that the strong should rule and the weak should shut up and follow, right? Don't believe me. To quote very literally from Hitler himself, the great masses are only part of nature. What they want is victory of the stronger and the annihilation or unconditional surrender of the weaker. People want this, Hitler says. People want to see the strong win and the weak get crushed. They enjoy it. They enjoy seeing a strong boxer beat up a weak one. At least that's what fascists think, right? So the weak here are kind of a burden on the group in the fascist ideology. They at best they're a burden, they're just less efficient. At worst, they're a liability. They're a danger to the group, right? They're gonna start doing things that will hurt the superior strong people. And so fascists don't like the poor. Fascists don't, at least rhetorically, they depend on the poor, partly as explained later, but they mentally, right, they kind of hate weaker groups in society. So despite them being conservative, usually, fascists are not moralistic. They hate moralism. They hate political correctness. They hate not being, not insulting people. They're tired of this crystal generation of, permanently anxious students who denounce teachers from Fime for insulting them. Real fascist would spit at you for doing that. So you can get a feeling that fascists are kind of the opposite of Christian ethics, right? Christ is not exactly the guy that says the strong should rule the weak. Yeah, he says that the strong should help the weak. Well, fascists have big problems with Christian ethics. They'll often be Catholic because that's like most convenient to them, but this is not really compatible in substance. But that's not a problem because fascism thrives on inconsistency. So you get the idea, right? The strong should rule the weak. Might makes right. Now, since they're on the side of the strong, right, fascists have a fascination with authority and leaders. They love the people on top. Now, all ideologies like their leaders, right? And sometimes you have very popular leaders, particularly if they're populist ideologies. So socialism, fascism, they have often strong leader figures. But with fascism, this runs a bit deeper, right? It's not just out of admiration, it's partly also out of fear. A lot of fascists are um, they're looking for the alpha male to follow because they're not him. But they they want to follow the master. They feel safe when they're next to the master. So this obsession with kind of a paternal authority, right, that they ascribe to the leader, who's supposed to be the macho alpha male, right? For example, to give Bolsonaro is a good example. This or Trump, right? Seen as the strongman, or Mussolini in this case. So to comparison, AMLO is also a very popular leader for his own people and for in general he is, but especially by people on the left. But AMLO is not the alpha male, right? AMLO has no fatherly authority. He's a grandfatherly vibe, right? Amor y paz. But a fascist leader would try to portray this very strong, I'm gonna cut off their hand if they are corrupt vibe to them. And this comes with what Theodor Adorno calls a fascist personality. Theodor Adorno is a Marxist philosopher, and he wrote a book about how fascists think before World War II. So he was like he was a German. He was in fascism when he wrote this. And he said, "But what I see with the people who join the fascist party is one of their main characteristics is that they will have a blind loyalty to the person above them, the leader, and they will have disgust for people below them. So you'll kiss the ass of the boss and you will step on the people that you're the boss of. And this is quite tangible. You can start recognizing this in people, to start recognize who around you is a fascist way of thinking. For example, in the faculty, there's a lot of people who, when the director walks by, they'll act like, it's Kim Jong-un coming out of the sea. They'll be like, oh my God, oh, director, I'm so happy to see you. And then when the student asks them something, they're like, I have no time for you, go away, right? Um, this is a fascist way of thinking. Because you just care of getting ahead. You only care about sucking up to the person above you. Once you reach their level, they'll mean nothing to you, and you step on them to reach the next step. But you're always looking upwards, and thus they make real heroes out of their leaders, right? This idea, they love heroes. They love superheroes, just as a cultural thing. Um, just individuals who stand out. The Nietzschean concept is the Übermensch. Nietzsche believes that some people are just better than others. You have people and you have awesome people. Those awesome people, they should be followed. And the Nazis, they took that from Nietzsche and turned it into to a whole philosophy of the Übermenschen, the super people. Also, one thing you can recognize fascists by is that they are obsessed with law and order. They're obsessed with crime. They love watching videos of the police beat up people. Or, even better, they love being the police that beats up people. They love police violence. Why? Because they love violence, but they don't dare to do violence just because. So they just want to wait till somebody breaks the law that gives them then an excuse to be violent, right? They'll enjoy seeing people get punished. Just like with Thomas Hobbes, is kind of a BDSM vibe sometimes to fascism, and they're fascinated with keeping the order, right? With this hard stand on crime, which is part of their grand illusion, because fascists usually are criminals, all of them. Mussolini was a criminal. Hitler dodged taxes while being dictator. He was like, okay, I already have all power. Nah, I'm not gonna pay taxes on this. Um, all his people, they stole a lot. Today, Trump is a criminal. Bolsonaro is accused of murder, and his family of all kind of corruption. All these guys are criminals, but they will point at other criminals and have people excited about that. So fascists like the leader. They're a bit like, to go back to popular culture, and I'm going to go with a very far reference. They're a bit like the minions in Despicable Me. You know the minions, these yellow little folks. Minions are fascists. Again, sorry to break your childhood. Minions, all they do is try to find the meanest and the baddest thing around and blindly follow it, right? That's what they do. There's this introductory scene where they're first running after a dinosaur, and then they're running after a bear, then a caveman, and then they end up with Drew in the end, right? That's a fascist mentality. You're just trying to look for the strongest guy around and you blindly follow him and applaud him. Minions are fascists. Now, that's all more psychological, right? Now, let's talk about something a bit more political, right? Is the nationalism aspect of fascism. So, fascism is a type of identity politics, just like feminism is, but then wanting something very different. It's based on a group dynamic, right? It's based on you belonging to your group, to your nation, to your country. It's about loyalty to this group. Either this group is formed historically in normal fascism, like the Italians, or, making America great again, or it could be by blood. This is more the Nazi variant. So this is about a certain ethnicity. That's then the group that they rally around. And it's a big difference with liberalism, because a lot of what I told you before, some kind of dark-hearted liberal could think the same thing, right? Competition, natural inequality, yeah, yeah, yeah. But they're individualist. Fascism is not. Fascism, yes, it's selfish, it's opportunistic, just like liberals are, but it's not individualistic. It's not about you, it's about us. It is a group thinking. People, yes, we like superheroes, but we like them because they are our heroes, right? We don't like the heroes of the other side. Fascists don't like strong people in general, they like their own strong people. So people only great in relation to the group. They're great insofar that their greatness gives a kind of group charisma to everyone, right? It's like when you cheer for a football team and they win, and then you feel like you won. That's kind of the fascist way of seeing this. Um, so is an identity-based thinking, right? It's us against the world. We have to be strong. So the strength of the individual makes the group stronger and the weakness hinders it. As you know, a group is as strong as its weakest link, right? It's a cliche saying. Fascists take this very serious. So yes, people need to be strong. We need to compete to separate strong from the weak because the group needs to be strong. And we should get the weak to the sidelines as soon as possible. We don't want any weak links in our group. They hinder it. So the values of fascism are not liberty and equality. The core values of fascism are strength and discipline. It's not everybody for themselves. If you do that, you will get weak. Now, why do they think that? Why do they hammer so much on the strength of the group? Well, that has to do, dear students, with their views on geopolitics. Um, with their views on imperialism, because fascism is a form of imperialism. So, normal nationalists that are not fascists, right? Which are quite rare, by the way. Normal nationalists, they think that the world should consist of nation states, where each their own country, right? And in theory, they're equal. If I'm really a nationalist, truly, then I respect other countries because I want to be left alone which from logically would follow that I'm going to leave you alone too, right? That's fair, that's consistent, logically consistent. But fascists are not that. They see it different. They say, yeah, everybody should have their own country, but those countries are not equal. Just like people are not equal, countries are not equal either. Some countries are just stronger than others. And this comes at the cost of each other. They're also competing, right? So if somebody's stronger than me, then I'm not going to be really free. I'm going to be bossed around by them. So the only way to really be free is to be the one that dominates, right? If you want to be free, if you want to expand, if you want to show your strength as a nation, that logically has to come at the cost of others. Just like in nature, you kill each other to survive. Well, in international relations, that's what happens too. Um, if you want to expand your market, well, then somebody else needs to sell less. So they think that only the most powerful countries are truly sovereign. Only the most powerful countries are truly free because they can boss around the others. They can dominate the others. And of course, the fascists want to be these countries, right? Because you're either on top or you're at the bottom, and we want to be on top. So fascism naturally leads to imperialism. Fascists are imperialists. They, at the end, want to boss around the smaller countries around them, maybe conquer them, take their stuff, because that's how they think the world works. They think the world as a giant competition, not just on the market, but like a real military competition between countries. So fascism leads to imperialism because it's kill or be killed in their idea, right? They think that everybody else are fascists too, and that they think like them. Bad people often think other people are bad people too. It's a common trait. So they say, well, since everybody's trying to do this, we need to be as strong as possible, right? This is how Japan was thinking. Japan was thinking, okay, everybody else is getting conquered by the West here in Asia. We better be the colonizer than the colonized, right? So then they try to conquer East Asia. And thus, if this is true, right, then every country should be as strong as possible and should be as dominant and alpha in its behavior as possible. And therefore, everything must, at least rhetorically, contribute to this national strength. Notice here that why they are so obsessed with competition is not just ambition, right? A lot of fascists don't think they're the strongest. They're scared. So they will try to get as strong as possible, right? It is fear that is the root of their competitive nature, not ambition. Otherwise, they would be neoliberals. It is fear that leads you there. As with all far-right ideologies, the root is fear. Now, I didn't give my lecture on Lenin, unfortunately, but if I don't know, did any of you check those slides? I think that's my answer. Okay, you didn't. Well, in case you did, dear students, and you should, you will see that Lenin exactly predicted this. Lenin said that imperialism is just the highest stage of capitalism. He said that capitalist countries will start competing with each other as a whole once they reach monopoly within their countries. This competition is going to get more intense. At some point, they're going to start attacking each other for more markets. Basically, he's explaining World War One, and that's going to lead to this mentality of kind of war capitalism, right? So from a Marxist, from a Leninist angle, fascism is a nationalist capitalism in a war mood. Do you still hear me though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Juno is here. That's good. At least she is. 1 out of 63. So that's how fascists think. Do you have any questions about what I just explained to you?
Not really.
Okay. Any suggestions? No?
I actually have a question. Like, what's the difference between a fascistic form of government and or leader and just an authoritarian? Like, what makes them different? Because as far as examples have gone, I think like I've not been able to identify one from each other.
Okay. Well, one difference I'm going to talk about is how they get to power. Um, Not all authoritarian leaders are like not, for example, communist authoritarian leaders don't believe any of this. They don't believe that people are naturally unequal. They don't believe that the strong should dominate the weak, and they won't necessarily lie about things, right? They'll just convince you of their own ideology. Or sometimes you just have dictators who don't have any particular ideology. Um, so these other dictators, for example, Pinochet in Chile, right? He was very convinced of neoliberal ideology, which is just a different ideology. So yeah, they having fascism kind of naturally meshes well with authoritarian leaders, and that's why they look like each other. But that depends on the leader. So you'd have to give me examples to tell you what the difference is. But they look alike a lot, yes. But the difference is in what they believe, in this general competitive outlook, because a lot of authoritarian leaders are kind of trying to hide away from the world and just be on their own. Fascists are more looking outwards, and also it is the way they get to power that makes them different. But I don't know if I answered this well so far. Any other questions? Sorry, Francisco, you were going to say something.
And I was just gonna say that I think that I have a better idea now. Thank you.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, let's talk about fascist practices, right? There's a difference between what fascists think and how they do things. Um, so politically, fascists, so within the political sphere of a country, right? Fascists want two things. One, they want to get in power because they're naturally ambitious and they want to stay in power. They have, although they're not all dictators, they all wish they were, right? You can see this with Trump today. He can't, he doesn't want to let go of things. So fascists want to get to power at all costs, and they want to stay there at all costs. And they also want to rally everybody behind the nation, right? Because they fear competition. They want to make a strong nation. And that means that people need to unite. So what they want is that they want power and they want unity at all costs. And by all costs, we mean all costs, including killing millions of people. But it doesn't need to go there. You don't need to kill millions of people to be a fascist. You only do that if you feel you need to. So they want to unite people behind them, right? Two things, unite and behind me. First thing they're going to do is come up with some kind of narrative that tries to unite people behind them. Right? The kind of myth of there being a certain people and you being their leader. Right? The myth of the leader and the folk. Folk is a German word. How do I describe this? Folk is the ethnical component of a people, right? This is hard to understand in Mexican context because we are mixed. Well, you are mixed, but in European context, right, you have a certain ethnicity to each country. For example, Dutch people are simply taller than Belgian people are, although we're neighbors, right? And what they will do is they use all kind of myths about their country as inspiration. They will tell the people about, we used to be so strong, or we're gonna be awesome in the future, right? They will often lie about the past. They will talk about making America great again, which then begs the question, when was America great, right? But this idea that in the past things were great, and we're gonna go back there, we're gonna do that again. or they will have very unrealistic ambitions about the future, right? They'll say, oh, but we are gonna become a world power, because our people, it's in our spirits that we can do that. An example, the original one of Mussolini, is that he invoked this idea of the Roman Empire, right? Italy was a mess and kind of still is. Italy is not a strong country and hasn't been for the last 400 years. They've been a successful country in terms of money, but not strong. But they used to be the strongest power in Europe 2,000 years ago, right? Under Caesar. So Mussolini start talking a lot about this Roman Empire. Say, see, it's really in our nature, right? They just held us back through division, but really, we are the same people that conquered the world. So we're gonna bring that back, right? Um, and just the idea that the people even are a unified people is also mythical, right? Most peoples in the world are a mix. But they come with the idea that they always have lived here, like we always have been a certain way. Hitler did this too, with that the Germans apparently were all white and blonde, although he wasn't. But this is where we come from. And this is about the people, but then you have the leader, right? They will try to leadership around it, with themselves as the mascot of the nation, with themselves as the leader that inspires hope and strength. Think of Vladimir Putin, for example. Putin, who actually is not a big man. He will always portray himself, and he's an old man now, but I don't know if you remember younger Putin, he is always acting macho, right? It's him riding half naked on a horse, it's him shooting tigers, it's him wrestling people. That's how he wants to be portrayed. Putin is this alpha macho dude, and that's kind of the cult of leadership you want, to see the leader as the strong man that's kind of brings in him the future of the country, right? You can see in him already how strong we're all gonna be. Take a Bolsonaro taking out his gun at the rally, right? This type of thing. So these leaders, one thing they need to be really good at is manipulation. This is a core skill of being a fascist leader. You need to be a good demagogue. You need to be a good manipulator. You need to be charismatic. There's no timid, well, they are timid fascists, but they're in the back, right? They're helping the big leader. The leader needs to be the strongest and also the one that's best at lying. Because all politicians lie, right? But with fascism, it's part of the game. It is not seen as a bad thing. It's okay to lie to people. Hitler realized this very early on. We know what's good for the people. They want me to be strong, so it's okay if I lie to them, right? They want it. They want to be lied to. Just like, people with cheating husbands. So it's okay. It's okay to lie. It's for their own good. So fascists will lie a lot. All politicians lie, fascists lie more. Trump is a very easy example of this. Now, they have a problem, right? They're going to try to unite the nation, but they still need to deal with good old Marx, his realization, right, that you have these two conflicting groups. Marxism is still true. You still have the capitalist class, you still have the proletariat. They won't get along. Capitalism has all these tensions inside them, right? All these crises. And fascists need to deal with this. They can reject Marxism, but they cannot reject truth. But they can reject the truth, and they do, but they can't wish it away, right? So they still need to somehow deal with these conflicting interests in society. And that's very problematic for them, because fascists want to be friends with both sides of this fight. They want support from the capitalists because they are the capitalists, and if they're not, just because they need money. And capitalists are seen as strong, and they kind of have sympathy for them. But fascism is also a mass movement. It's not an elitist movement. It's a populist movement. They need the masses. They need the workers for their muscle, right? For their big marches and parades. So they want both sides of this conflict. Which from Marx's point of view, you simply can't do, right? You can't just, well, you need to choose. You need to help one or both. And fascists don't want to make this choice. So how can you do that? Well, there's one way of doing that, right? How can you and your enemy be friends? Well, if there was a third person that you hate even more. So as Lenin predicted, and again, you missed my class on Lenin, this is done by forming a unity against other people. If you and the person you dislike most were in a room together and aliens would invade, you probably would make a temporary alliance with that person against the aliens, right? Well, that's what they're trying to do here too. Capitalist class and the working class are gonna be presented with a common enemy, and they are gonna unite against that enemy below this one leader. How do you do that? Well, one of the ways you do that is by reducing the amount of people that you need to be friendly with. So let me say this differently. If the elite wants to help poor people without giving them any more, right? So you want to help more, but you don't want to pay more. There's one way of doing that. And that's by getting rid of more poor people, because then there's more money left for the ones that remain, right? If you could just kick half of them outside of your country, then the remaining ones with the same budget, you can give them twice as much. So that's kind of a deal they're going to try to go for. They're going to try to strengthen solidarity within the country by shrinking it. So if you see solidarity as a circle, right, and everybody inside the circle is in solidarity with each other, one way of increasing this cohesion is by making it a smaller circle. Yeah, you just push people out, so there's more left for the people on the inside. This is the typical fascist trick, where this is, I think you'll see this in memes. You have a capitalist, you have a worker, and a capitalist, and they have 10 coins. Capitalists take 8 of those coins, and he tells the worker, look, that immigrant, he's going to try to steal a coin from you, right? You just try to put weak, poor people against each other, and one of them is going to side with the capitalist class then against that other weak group, whether they're immigrants, or politically communists, or indigenous people, or whatever, right? You're going to try to exclude people to pacify the relationships inside of it. You're going to stress the similarity within two very different groups by underlying the difference with others. So a rich regio and a poor regio, right? Let's say they would meet. The rich one, the fascist, he would say, well, there, stinky guy, and please stay at a distance. We don't have anything in common, right? But we're both from Neblion. We're both regios. So that evil federal government, they're trying to take our taxes to spend it on healthcare and education, all these stupid things. So why don't you and me make a deal, dear Lacayo? Why don't we team up against them, those stupid, stinky, lazy people in Oaxaca, right? That's how the fascists will do it. So you have nothing in common with the other class. You just find another group that is even more different, the Muslims, for example, and you point at them and you say, we're both not like them, so we're kind of the same, even if we're not. That's step one. Step two is that you're going to try to hide these problems. So capitalism will have problems, right? And fascism is no exception to this. But instead of solving them, you're just going to push them away. Fascists are notoriously bad at dealing with problems. Not because they cannot deal with problems, they simply don't want to. They're too lazy to come with serious solutions. And they deal with problems by making them somebody else's problem. This is what externalization means. Externalization is a core evil in the world. That's a much bigger talk. So if I have trash, right? If Nah, they just took my trash. If I have trash and I don't want to deal with it, so I throw it on the road, I have externalized my trash. I no longer have the trash, but the trash didn't disappear, right? Some employee of the city will have to pick it up at some point. So I just made my problem now somebody else's problem. Therefore, I solved it, right? That's what fascists will always try to do. They'll try to pass the burden onto someone else that cannot help it, right? They're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. That's a very fascist thing, right? You're going to promise something you cannot do, and then if they ask you how you're going to do it, then you're going to point at some other person who's then going to do that for you. So fascism is a bit predatory. It's predatory on other countries. It's predatory on weak groups. It survives by taking from others, or by shrinking its circle. Now, how do you do this in practice, right? How do you how do you get power? Well, as here the 3 steps to being a successful fascist. Please don't do this. Step number 1: find some weak internal enemy to blame for the country's problems. You, as a fascist, don't really have any solutions to anything, but you want to get to power. So you're going to blame all the problems on some kind of group that you know will not resist you, and then you're going to solve the problems by, solving this group. So you could either blame it all on low-level criminals, you could blame it on immigrants, you could blame it on Jews in the case of Hitler, poor people, if poor people are a minority in that country, indigenous people, southerners, whatever it is. But you're going to find somebody weak, you're going to blame it on them, and you're going to kind of, or it could be people on welfare, doesn't matter, ninis, you're going to gather people around you against them, right? You're going to say, oh, I'm the governor with the lowest approval rating in the country, but hey, at least we're from Nuevo Leon, and those southerner people, right, they're holding us back. So you should support me. Not that Bronco's a fascist, but he uses these things sometimes. So you find something weak to blame, right? Often you'll use race for this. Is a big difference with socialism, right? Socialism will also have an internal enemy, right? In Mexico, there's a mafia de poder, but that internal enemy is stronger than the socialists. They'll pick a fight with strong groups in society, with the capitalist class, not with weak groups. Fascism is always about stepping on the weak. So you'll find an opponent that you know you can handle, because deep down they're cowards. Number 2, so you have an internal enemy. That will get you somewhere. But not everything can be blamed on that internal enemy, because at the end they're weak. So some things are just not credible, that they caused, I don't know, some kind of economical crisis, that you cannot make people believe that. So you also need to find an external enemy, or you could invent them, right? And if you do that, China is a good external enemy to have, or the Mexicans, right? They're coming, they're killers, they're rapists, they send us their worst. It's very sad. And some, I think, are good people. This is a very famous speech from a certain US president. You're going to invent an external enemy, and that's going to help you create unity again, because people are going to rally with you against them, right? Or you're going to start some war, or it's Venezuela. They're the real enemy, right? And then people are like, oh, we don't want to be like Venezuela. So then they're going to come behind you against them, right? So you have this external enemy that they organize around, and that creates nationalism. It creates unity in the country, especially if people are scared. They're gonna be more susceptible to a strong leader. They're gonna just, they want protection, so they'll take whoever it is, and that will help keeping them behind this capitalist elite. Step number 3, if you want to win elections, fascists are just going to promise everything to everyone because they just want to win, right? Once in power, the plan is different. But the first step is to get to power. So fascists will promise everything to everyone and try to solidify power before people found out that it was all a fraud, right? Maybe even cancel elections. That Mussolini did, that Hitler did, that modern fascists sometimes do it. So how do you do that? Well, to the workers, you promise them socialism, and to the rich, you promise tax cuts, but you're only going to do one of them, right? Trump, for example, Trump promised free healthcare, right? He didn't do that. He eliminated Obamacare and didn't do anything in turn, but he did do his tax cuts, right? So one of his promises was fake, the other was real. You can guess which one usually ends up being real, the one of the elite. But they will promise the workers whatever they want to hear, but when they get to power, they will betray them. This is the historical truth of fascism. Fascism pretends to be socialist until they get to power, then they backstab them. Mussolini came to power as a candidate for the Socialist Party, of a candidate of the unions, of the trade syndicates. Once he was in power, he abolished syndicates. he completely betrayed the movement that got him there, right? And then he turned fascist, and then like he just put in jail all his old friends and all of that. Hitler did the same thing. Hitler ran a left-wing agenda. He had actual socialists in his party, called National Socialist Party. Once he won, he gathered all the whole left of his party, all the socialists, and killed them. This is called the Night of the Long Knives. You can look that up. He literally did this. This was over a weekend. He got all of them tracked. These were hundreds of people. The entire leftist party had them tracked down and stabbed to death. This is typical for fascists. They'll promise everything to everyone, and then they'll take one side. But preferably they won't kill them, right? They'll try to stave this off. They'll try to buy as long time as possible so people would not figure out that they were lying all along. Now, how do you buy time? Well, one of the ways you can buy time is by distracting people, right? By being funny, by saying wild things, by having odd press conferences, by creating controversies. So people are going to talk about that, and they're not going to talk about the fact that you're not keeping your promises, or by distracting people with domination over others. So if I'm rich, right, and you're poor, and I promise to do things, but I'm not going to do things for you, I can be like, yeah, okay, I'm not helping you, but you, sir, you, Mr. Abel, you could be a king in your own house, right? Okay, I'm not helping you, but you can still be a strong person. You just should tell your wife. Your wife should respect you more. That's what we should really be talking about, right? So you distract people. Fascists will often be very sexist because it keeps the men, working class men, kind of busy, not feeling like they're being crushed by the elite because they themselves have someone else to kick, right? And as long as you can pass this burden down to someone else, you might be less conscious of your own exploitation. So fascists will often incorporate sexism as a way to keep men distracted. And if they do find out, right, then you're going to try to blame it on someone. Like, oh, I promised to do this, but I cannot do it because of the Mexicans or something like that. And if that fails, because it will fail at some point, well, then it's time to take out the knives, right? It's time to kill the resistance. Now and then in Mexican history, you have a more fascist-minded president who will fail, and then when he's about to fail, he'll just kill the opponent. Putin is very good at it. Every time there's an opponent to him, his opponents all share a very strange hobby of dying in mysterious circumstances, of unidentified chemicals. It's a very weird thing. They all are part of this chemistry club, apparently. So you kill the resistance, or you make people fear you. You'll just be very hard-handed leader. And if they don't respect you, then they'll fear you and respect you out of fear, not out of love. But you don't want to get there. A good fascist never reaches that level. A good fascist keeps control without needing to resort to this. But he will do it if he needs to. Now, lastly, let's talk a bit about the economy. I haven't talked about it yet at all, right? Because again, fascism is an inconsistent theory, but they do have a sort of standard economical system that they will develop, which is what we normally call corporatism. So fascism is capitalism, right? It's not a variant of communism, it's a variant of capitalism, where you have an elite that will invest money to make more money by exploiting others. Yeah, capital accumulation. Except that they are less enthusiastic about free trade. Fascists might have free trade, but they won't believe in it because they don't trust other countries, right? And they want to press maximum advantage for themselves. So yes, they're okay with trading with other countries as long as I'm selling, but I don't want to buy from you, right? So it is a kind of nationalist capitalism. And again, in the economy, they're gonna again try to create unity. They need the capitalist elite, and they are the capitalist elite. Just think of Trump, right? Literally, or Putin too. But they don't want this full liberalism. They don't want to depend on other countries. They don't believe in this idea of Smith of the wealth of nations, that if all countries just open their borders and trade with each other, they're going to be better off. They don't trust other countries. I don't want to depend on no other country. And they also want to keep the workers loyal, right? They don't care for the workers, but they want to keep them in a good mood, at least. So they cannot go all the way capitalist, right? So what they're going to do is some kind of corrupt capitalism called corporatism. In corporatism, the state is going to work directly with the interest groups, with the industry. They're going to have meetings with Coparmex in Mexico, right? And they're going to make decisions together. This is very clear in Russia, right? Putin is a strong guy, but really, Putin is just the figurehead of a group of the 20th richest people in Russia, and Putin is their front man. So in corporatism, the government and the companies they make decisions together. So the government shares the power with the capitalists, right? If capitalists like, man, my workers are striking, can't you send some police to just bash some skulls, and then they'll shut up, then they will send some police. On the other hand, the state, because they get them so close, will also try to influence industry, right? All of the industry is stronger than the fascist leader together, but the fascist leader is stronger than each single rich person. So if the rich are about to embarrass the government, they'll try to stop them from doing that, right? They try to keep them in line. So sometimes they will do socialist-like things, like sometimes they'll care a bit about healthcare, but they won't do it at the cost of the rich. So they'll do it at the cost of some other poor group, right? If we get rid of these people, we have more money to now spend on you. So sometimes they will do social programs, but not with any real distribution. They're not going to raise taxes for this. They're not going to take the money from the rich to do this. They'll find some other way, usually by taking from weaker groups to then give to other weaker groups. Because at the end of the day, they do think inequality is good, right? They have no problem with people being very rich, as long as those people don't get in the way of the nationalist project, right? If one of them wants, I don't know, to separate, then okay, we're going to kill him. But in practice, we're going to collude with them. As Mussolini says, fascism is a merger of state and corporate power. That's a literal quote from him. So the economy is organized in function of national strength. Government, business, we're going to come together and say, okay, how are we gonna divide the pie in a way that the country is going to be strongest, right? I'm going to be corrupt. I'm going to let you be powerful as long as you do things that are in the national interest. Now, eventually, all fascism, because it's predatory in its nature and it solves problems by externalizing them, needs to expand, needs to have an empire. It needs to find weaker countries than themselves to exploit, to keep economic unity. You need to keep your workers loyal, you need to do things, but you don't want to give them any of your own money. So you need someone else's money, right? If you, for example, if you have a colony, that's very handy. Then you can raise living standards in the motherland because some other people are dying, and then your own workers don't need to do that, right? So capitalism in this fascist form will always tend towards an empire, depending on how strong the country is, right? Sometimes the country might be fascist, but they're just too small and they can't do this, then they probably fail. But that's kind of the logic here, economically speaking. So fascism is a kind of corrupt capitalism. That's their natural economical leg that they stand. All right, students, I have talked enough. What are your questions? Are your remarks, things you want to say?
I wanted to know how that the point of inequality, how strength and weakness is defined, is determined. How do they determine it?
They determine it by seeing what happens. So the strong will naturally separate, they will flow to the top, and the weak will sink to the bottom. So they just see what happens. If you reach power, then it means that you must be strong. And if you are at the bottom, that means you must have done something wrong. So for them, it's they don't try to define it on forehand. They'll just see what happens. With the Nazis, that's different. The Nazis will try to on forehand determine who's supposed to win and who's supposed to lose, because they will define it on a racial, genetic basis. They'll say that the white people are going to be superior, and black people are inferior, for example. But with fascists, they kind of just see whoever crawls to the top, if that makes sense. Because they believe this comes naturally.
Okay, I kind of get it.
So yeah, whoever is most dominant will be considered strong. Strength doesn't need to be physical strength, right? It could also be being the meanest person, for example. Dominance, as you know, dominance. Let me go on a little sidetrack here. My friend Hegel developed a very interesting theory of dominance. Hegel had this book he wrote about the slave and the master. And he said, the master is the one who is willing to escalate violence the furthest. The one who's willing to take it to the end is going to be the master. And the one that's going to submit to it is going to become the slave. That's what dominance is. So if me and you were in a prison cell, I don't know you in real life, as you know, but I think I'm bigger than you. It might look like I'm dominant, but maybe I don't want to hurt you. But maybe you are willing to hurt me, right? You kill me in my sleep, and I won't dare to kill you in your sleep. So you're going to be the dominant one. Not because you're stronger, but because you are willing to take the risk of stabbing me, and I'm not interested in doing that with you. So you're going to be the boss, even if I'm naturally, physically stronger than you. That's what dominance is. Dominance is the willingness to escalate. If you, and you can see this even within couples, right? There's always one person who cares less, about relationship, one person who wants to dare to escalate things further. And that person is going to be the dominant one. And that goes in life too. Dominance is based on, is not who's strong, it's who's meaner. And that goes in society too. So the strong are just whoever makes it happen. And that could be a very weak, physically weak person that just is very manipulative and very smart and very ruthless. Think of El Chapo, for example, right? El Chapo is not a physically imposing man. His name itself gives that away. But, well, I would be scared if he was in the room with me, right? Because he's thousands of times meaner than I am. So strength and weakness is not necessarily physical strength. They will like physical strength because it's an outward signifier of strength, right? Strong people are strong, but it can mean more than that. And so weakness is also not just people physically weak, although they will dislike them. They don't like handicapped people and stuff like that. They in general are sexist against women. It's also just whoever is not gonna try to compete, whoever's not gonna play the power game, they're also considered as weak, as unambitious, as lazy. Does that answer a little bit more the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any comments or things you want to say? How to keep away fascism? I think this is hard, by the way. Fascism, one of the weaknesses of fascism is it can only happen in specific situations, right? You, like, it builds on other things. It builds on negative feelings. But once it's there, it's hard to stop. Mexico does not have a strong tradition of fascism. Partly because Mexico has no imperial ambitions, never had, right? Partly because Mexico is so mixed, and just partly because the PRI always kept things under control and stopped it from going there. But you start to see some elements of fascism sometimes. For example, a few years ago, you see how people reacted to migrants, right? When the caravans were here, suddenly Mexicans became Trumpists. And suddenly were like, those foul Hondurans, right? They come here, they're rapists, and like a literal Trump speech. A lot of your tias suddenly became far right. And so you have this. Frena is, you could see Frena maybe as that. I think the closest to fascism that you have in real life politics would be people like Bronco and Alfaro. Bronco, I don't think Bronco is a fascist. I don't think he has the mentality, but he has a lot of the tactics. I think Bronco is the normal conservative, but he sometimes will act like it. Like this whole federalist stuff. If you look at it, this is a collection of the least popular governors in Mexico who are gonna, in my view, cover up their own failing by just pointing at some abstract thing, right? Um, and people are very susceptible to this because it works on identity, right? I might have done nothing for you, but hey, we're both from the north, and that, we should be together against those others. So, okay, to answer your question, I think the best way to open the eyes of people who are susceptible to fascism is to find the lies in the fascist narrative. Because fascism is based on manipulation. If you can make people feel like they are being manipulated, they might start trusting those leaders. That's one thing. And in a more historical variant, fascism fascism and socialism or communism compete for the same thing. They compete for people who are annoyed at the normal state of things. right? So often the best way to avoid fascism is the success of socialism. Because that's going to take the same people, at least the working class people, and push them in a different direction. Again, if you're scared of socialism, then that's not a solution. But that I've seen so far is the biggest thing. What will not work is moralizing, because fascists hate moralizing. So telling them, "Oh, you're being racist," that's not going to help at all. It's going to push them more in that direction. I think showing how they are being manipulated by the people they follow is what they're probably be most susceptible to. But all in all, Mexico has always managed to channel that same energy back into either the left or the mafia de poder and kind of stopped a big fascist movement from happening. That's one of our historical fortunes. In Europe, that is not the case. Any other questions, remarks? Did you find this lecture interesting? Because you're gonna say yes, but really, or was it more confusing?
No, it was really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, and really
Good.
well explained too.
Okay, thank you very much. So if there's nothing else to discuss, dear students, then next time we're going to talk about the Nazis, right? As I said, I'm going to just keep talking next Thursday. I know you have to go and I know a class will end, but Monday there's no class, so I'll just keep recording. Hopefully one of you can stay. I know it was a one-person audience, but that's what we're gonna do. Okay, that's that. Don't forget you have to read a text about the Nazis. This text will, let me talk a bit about this. Patriotism and nationalism. Okay. Patriotism is a simple word, as different with patriotism means that you love your country and you love your people, right? And that you are willing to make sacrifices for your country. That's being a patriot. It's the G.F. Kennedy quote, don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, right? And nationalism is a political theory, not just a feeling, that has the idea that each group should first of all be on their own, and we should stay on, each should stay with their own group, and we need to first think of ourselves. And we need to first do for ourselves, and we need to give priority to us, which is not necessarily a negative thing, right? Now, there are two types of nationalism. You have positive and negative nationalism. Negative nationalism means that you're going to define yourself by what you're not. So you're going to like look at others and say, oh, we're not like them, we're so different, right? A positive nationalism is go to the patriotism, just comes from the fact that you're confident who you are, right? That you think that your culture is cool and that your people are cool, and it comes out of love, not out of hate for others. So that kind of positive nationalism and patriotism can be the same thing, but they're not necessarily so. But patriotism is not necessarily tied to the idea that you think everybody should stay in their own country or that you should help yourself first. It just is the willingness to sacrifice for your country. So nationalists are going to be patriotic, but not all patriots are nationalists necessarily. Does that make sense? Or did I confuse you more?
No,
Is
I
American
think
exception?
that with
Yes.
that comment that all patriots are nationalists, but not all nationalists are patriotic. I guess I kind of understood more, and it makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Doctor.
So one is a bigger theory, right? Maria asks, is American exception related to negative nationalism? No, not necessarily. I think not Trump, but just Americans in general, they have some idea of who they are, and they also don't have a good idea of who other people are. I don't know how they're related. It's related more to imperialism. American exceptionalism is the idea that America is simply different than the rest of the world, which has two consequences. They think they're better, that they're the best country, everybody else are losers. Second, American exceptionalism also means that they will see themselves as the exception to the rule. So Americans will often break law, break rules, but they think it's justified because they're different, right? You have normal people, you have normal countries, and you have America. And since we're better than the rest, we don't have to play by the same rules. That's what I understand as American exceptionalism. I don't see that directly related to nationalism. Negative nationalism is, for example, in the Netherlands. Netherlands always had a hard time with their own identity because whatever they define themselves at, Belgians are the same thing except tall, or Germans are the same people. So their nationalism is often based against other countries. They'll be like, yeah, but we're not Muslim, or we're not like those. And that's more negative nationalism. You're just gonna define your own group by who you hate rather than what you love. All right, I'm out of time. Dear students, I'll see you next time. Don't forget to read the text. It's a very important text for all of you who think that the Nazis are these hyper efficient, cool people that, you know, got the job done. You should definitely read that text. Adios. Take care.
Have a nice day.
Okay. You have a nice day too, Miss Regina. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, teacher.